Hey guys, Jesse Lavelle, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to show you guys how to create background separation, or bokeh. Today I want to show you how to take a beautiful scene like this where you see everything clear in the background, and I want to show you how to change that scene to create background separation, or bokeh, like this. And there's a couple of different ways that you can create this type of effect, so let's explore those different ways and the different types of effects that you can use to create this separation. Now, the first, or probably the easiest thing that you can change as far as trying to create bokeh or background separation in your picture is gonna be changing your aperture, right? So right now, I'm shooting at 2.8. I've got an ND filter on because I'm using video, so I have to adhere to the 180 shutter rule. If you don't know what the 180 shutter rule is, go ahead and check it out in my other video. But the biggest thing about opening up your aperture is gonna be that it's going to let in a lot of light. And in an area like this where there's bright sun, I'm going to have to limit the amount of light that gets in onto my sensor, and that's where the ND filters come in. So I'm able to shoot at something like f2.8, which normally would blow my scene out and be way overexposed, but I've effectively put a pair of sunglasses on my lens using my ND filter, and what we're going to do is then be able to shoot at f2.8, which creates a very shallow depth of field. If you don't know what the depth of field is, that's essentially how much of the picture is going to be in sharp focus. So right now I'm shooting at f2.8. My depth of field is cut down very shallow so that when this focuses on my eyes, this is going to be my focal plane. Again, the focal plane is always going to be parallel with your lens, right? So the focal plane comes and hits my face, it slices down a thin depth of field, and all you're going to get is my face in focus, where all of the detail in the back is going to just kind of blur out and fall off. And that's where you get that really nice separation between your subject and the background. And people call that bokeh. Just so you can get a quick reference of how aperture affects your picture, right now I'm shooting at f8, so that's gonna create kind of a, less shallow depth of field type of a shot. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna switch it over to f2.8, and you're going to see how that aperture just opened up. It's letting more light in. My ND filter's taking care of that. But now you're seeing that the background is separated from me more, or it's more blurry and it's sharp on just my face. Again, we're gonna go back. Let's bring it to f8. And now we're shooting at f8. And you see how you can see the background. It might still be a little bit blurry, but you can see it. And then we're gonna again open the aperture to f2.8. And now you're seeing the shot at f2.8 with a more shallow depth of field. I was speaking with somebody on Facebook, and they were asking how to create, background separation, or bokeh. And, I kind of explained the general principles that you can change when it comes to using different lenses or using different apertures, closing the distance in between your lens and your subject, or increasing the distance in between your subject and the background. And those are the basic things that you can kind of change or tweak to create that kind of effect. But what we're gonna do is get right into all of these things, and later in the conversation, the person admitted that they pretty much shoot in auto mode, which is fine, but I do think that at that point, it's gonna be kind of tough to create the effects that you want, because that's the problem with auto, is it's gonna take away a lot of those creative effects that you can do. So what we're gonna do is encourage you guys to switch to manual mode. We're gonna take control of the aperture, shutter, and ISO, and we're gonna create bokeh effects so that you guys can look more professional. 2 is going to be bringing your subject closer to the lens. The closer the subject comes to the lens, the more bokeh you're going to create in your background. Now, the other thing that you can change is the distance between the background and your subject. The longer the distance between the background and your subject, the more blurry effect that you're going to see in the background from the distance increasing from your subject to the background. Now, the fourth thing that jumps out at me is actually changing your lens or using a longer focal length, and that's called compression. And if you use a longer focal length, you really don't even need to use that wide of an aperture because of the compression, or the fact that you're zooming in onto the image. You're going to get a compressed image where the background will again blur out a lot faster than you would normally need to on, like, say something like I'm using now, a 24mm lens, which is wide. That's going to really need a shallower depth of field with a higher aperture to create bokeh, whereas if I used a 100mm lens, I wouldn't need to use as wide of an aperture or have the increased separation between me and my background like I do with a wider lens, and that's called compression. So just to kind of recap everything, there's 4 things that you can change. 1 is going to be using a wider aperture. 2 is going to be bringing your subject closer to the lens. 3 is going to be making sure that the background has an increased amount of distance between the subject and the background. And 4 is going to be using a longer focal length lens to create compression. All 4 of those factors mixed together are going to create bokeh, or separation between the background and your subject. So guys, I hope that this helped you a little bit. If it did, think about going below, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and I'll see you guys on my next video.